Alright, today we're going to dig into a number of guitar legends, and we're going to get some insights from Joe Bonamassa. What we're talking about today is Glenn Hughes' choice of the best guitarists he's ever worked with. Now, for those of you who need a refresher, Hughes' career has been nothing short of astonishing. He first broke through with the hard rock band Trapeze, and then went on to join Deep Purple during their famous Mark III and Mark IV lineups. He's released countless solo albums, fronted Black Sabbath for a time, and in more recent years co-founded the supergroup Black Country Communion with Joe Bonamassa, Jason Bonham, and Derek Sherinian. On top of that, he's guested on more records than I could remember or care to name, and he's always bringing a powerhouse voice and a rock-solid bass playing to anything he does. Because of his talents and his long-lasting career, Hughes has had the rare privilege of working with some of the greatest guitarists of all times. Among them are Ritchie Blackmore, Tommy Bolin, Tony Iommi, and Gary Moore, along with Bonamassa, as previously mentioned, and many, many others. That by itself is an insane resume, and it only scratches the surface. So recently, when GuitarWorld.com asked Hughes who was the greatest guitarist he's ever worked with, you'd expect him to name one of the giants like Iommi or Ritchie Blackmore, but instead, he named two guitarists in a rather surprising fashion. The two that he named were Joe Bonamassa and Gary Moore. So, with Bonamassa, Hughes built Black Country Communion into one of the tightest hard rock outfits of the last 10 or 15 years, but he calls Joe Bonamassa the greatest guitarist right now. But when it comes to the overall crown, Hugh gives the slight edge to Gary Moore. He remembers their sessions together on the Run for Cover album and emphasizes that Moore wasn't just a bluesman. And this is something that I would like to pick up on, which is when you say the name Gary Moore, most people think of the blues, and while that is justifiable because he was a great blues guitar player, that was only one side of Gary Moore. Now let's listen into something that Joe Bonamassa had to say about Gary Moore, and he is going to talk about him as a blues player. Let's listen in right here.
They paved the way towards the blues rock being relevant in Europe, you know, and where we had Stevie Ray Vaughan, Europe had Gary Moore, you know, and Rory Gallagher. And so, you know, I always respected Gary's playing. I always loved his playing. And the fact that he was this bull in a china shop playing blues songs, you know, with an old Les Paul through a couple of Marshall amps, give you one guess where I got that playbook, you know. So he was this bull in a china shop playing this unbelievably intense blues music to a very appreciative audience over here. And to the point where when I first started my solo career, I always said, I think if I go to Europe, I think people will dig it. I think they're really going to dig it.
So what I'd like to say is that while Gary Moore is most well known for being a blues player, and that he did a lot like Bonamassa says there, he was all around great guitarist, and I think that is what Glenn Hughes is talking about here. He's saying that Gary Moore is the greatest that he ever worked with because he was so versatile, because he could play so many different things, and he was just so incredibly creative. He was also a great improviser, but he let that side of his playing languish in favor of being a polished perfectionist when it came to his live performances. And I always found that very interesting, that you can sit and find clips of Gary Moore improvising and it will blow your mind, but at the same time, when you see him play live, he tends to play in a very polished fashion with a lot of rehearsal time obviously going into his performances. So anyway, what I'd like to know from you is, are you surprised by this choice by Glenn Hughes, and do you agree with him? Do you think that Gary Moore should be at the top of the list, or do you think Blackmore or Iommi or one of the other great guitarists that Hughes has worked with should be at the top of the list? Drop your thoughts and comments in the section below, and I will definitely read all of the comments and reply to as many as I can. If I had to pick one of the guitarists out of all the guitarists that I know of Glenn Hughes has worked with to say is the best, I tend to agree with his choice here. I think Gary Moore is the best all-around guitarist, even though he may not even be my favorite of the group. This is what I think, but what really matters is what you think. So if you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please drop it in the section below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. Music Guru here, asking you to help us on our march to 10,000 subscribers.